everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor with Rocky messing between two ferns, supposedly between two ferns. We can't actually see the ferns, but we know that.
I switched the background. We're not doing that anymore.
Oh, he took the ferns away. Oh my goodness. No, now I'm gravely disappointed.
Won't be the first.
Yeah. Our special guest today is Craig Ball, lawyer, educator, speaker, teacher, forensic specialist, and general bon vivant, and man of the world. So
not about
Craig,
town.
Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen, wherever you may be.
Well, I as am you, am in New Orleans. Rocky is, I presume, still in Israel. Rocky, still in Tel Aviv?
I am still here. They have not let me escape yet. So,
I see our immigration policy is still working. Right.
Yeah, I think this is the longest I've ever gone in probably like 8 to 10 years without traveling. So it feels very, very weird, but in some ways, so
feels very, very safe to me.
Yes, I'd rather just be right where I am. So
yeah,
all good.
So continuing our format of asking incredibly nuanced but potentially embarrassing questions, Rocky, why don't you kick it off? What do you got to ask Craig?
Well, my first question for Mr. Ball is, Craig, I know that you've been known to show up to various video calls in costume. I was very disappointed that we don't deserve a costume. Come on, what's up?
You didn't say a word. I'm doing the full frontal nudity from the waist down, of course, but that's customary in the new regime. Yeah, what would you like? We can take a break. I'll come back as anything you want.
We might have to film a follow-up for that one.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing that. With thanks to EDRM, the eDiscovery reference model, headed by Mary Mack and Kaylee Walstead now, have been doing twice weekly support calls. And while I try to play it pretty close to the vest and serious on the Tuesday calls, because that's where we really deal with people who are in need, Friday has morphed into more of a fun happy hour. And so we theme the calls each week and encourage everyone to join. You don't have to be afflicted or unemployed or unhappy. In fact, it's even better if you aren't. So come on aboard Friday at 5 p.m. Central Time, and we do themed calls. So I've dressed up as a completely blue body painted genie for Aladdin, and I've come as Prince and an English judge. And what was it recently? I even forget. But yeah, we've had fun with it.
Good. It's always good to have a little bit of fun. But let's go to work for a minute. So you got the nice big intro there from Tom of all the different hats that you wear or have worn over the years. You're known in the industry as someone who really gets it when it comes to forensics and understanding data and what eDiscovery is all about. How do you end up getting into that as an attorney? I mean, what brought you to technology?
Well, I've been fascinated by technology, particularly electronics and electrical engineering and communications, since I literally was 7 years old, and my big brother helped me create some cool things back in the day, modulate a flashlight beam so we could communicate over a long distance, which in its day, we're talking about the 1960s now, that was a cool thing to be doing. And to make it short,
Tom was like 35, right?
Tom did it with fire when shortly after the invention of fire, and and then I got into telephones and so-called phone freaking, and ended up becoming a lawyer to extricate as a consequence of my having to be extricated from some let's just say some tawdry misadventures with the long lines telephone switching system, and the rest was history. I had to get out of electrical engineering as part of a adjudication of my presumed innocence. And so I ended up working for my lawyer, became a lawyer, couldn't go back to technology until the coast was clear. And once I thought the FBI wasn't paying any attention to me anymore, if they really ever had paid much attention, I threw myself with both feet back into computing. When I was in high school, I'd done a lot of computing remotely, acoustic coupled modems and teletype machines, pretty much the primordial stuff that young people of my day were able to do. And it just stuck with me. So when technology came to the fore, I just happened to be standing at the corner of litigation and technology, minding my own business, and it turned out to be a good place to be at the time.
Yeah, it's worked out pretty decently, I think.
Oh, I don't know. I would have rather, I was going to be the Tesla or the Elon Musk or the Thomas Edison or the Bill Gates of my time. And I blew that through bad behavior. So I had to make do with the tools that were left to me.
Cool. So, I mean, most of the stuff that I've read of yours really does get into the nitty gritty of forensics and, you know, the real details behind everything from your most recent article on Slack space and how those things are working. Do you think that first of all, you've got like some kind of responsibility to the industry to be bringing these things to light? I mean, there's not a lot of people talking and writing today in that level of detail. People tend to talk about, you know, the general e-discovery space or general collections or things like that. And I mean, I love the stuff that you put out. It's got the right level of detail. It's able to be understood. I don't know if it's able to be understood by a non-technical person necessarily, but it seems to hit that right level of detail. And is that something that like you consciously think about in terms of when you're writing it? I'm going to attack something that most people aren't thinking about and talking about today, or is it just something of interest?
I do try to fill gaps that I see out there in the literature. But I hope that I'm talking about things that ultimately pertain to getting electronic evidence before triers of fact in responsible ways, where we have proper chains of custody, proper means of authentication, where the lawyers who are presenting it understand what they're dealing with and don't inadvertently misrepresent its import and cause people grief. And I think we see a lot of waste and cost that stems from lawyers who know, I wouldn't even say just enough to be dangerous. They know not enough to be dangerous in many situations. So the answer is yes. I strive to appeal to a continuum of readers. And as you know, in our area of expertise, we have people who are from the technical side and who are thrust into the law in support roles, IT roles, experts, forensic examiners, and the like. And so I have to speak with enough respect for what they already know, not to just completely alienate them with pablum. But at the other side of the equation is I have a lawyer audience that has a genuine interest in trying to become more fluent in electronic evidence, but are terrified of it. Lawyers are judged in many instances, particularly litigators, or feel they are judged by what they know and feel vulnerable if there is something they don't know. Lawyers in the pejorative need to feel like they're the smartest people in the room. And that may not be entirely fair, but there is a sense that if you admit that you don't understand something, that your opponent will seek to exploit it or in some other way use it against you. And so I try to provide a level of detail, kind of like a kid's movie in a sense. If you go to a great children's movie, it works at two levels. they're the embedded kind of adult jokes that keep the parents from tearing their hair out at the Sunday matinee. And then there are the fart jokes and the people falling on their asses that engage the little ones. And so in a sense, that's maybe the kindest thing I can say about my approach to this is I try to give the level of detail that makes it responsible to those for whom those details are not throwaways. They're key to the integrity of the evidence, but provide the surrounding context that hopefully can make it accessible to a non-technical reader. That's the goal at any rate. And if somebody tells me I tried to read your thing and it was over my head, then that's not a failure in the reader, that's a failure in me as the writer.
Well said. So on the topic of forensics, do you see, cloud is everywhere, right? Everything's going to the cloud, data's in the cloud. Do you see that the practice of forensic litigation, forensic technology in litigation has changed or is changing, or is it going to die? Is it going to go away? Is it something that people really need to still concentrate on in terms of a defensible collection from a forensic perspective in the cloud? Or is it something that you rely on the providers and that it becomes the provider obligation to make sure that that data is properly collected and then sent over? Like what role does a up and coming, whether they be an attorney, whether they be a technologist who's looking at getting into this field in general? I don't know why anyone would possibly want to do that today, but if they're trying to get in there and trying to figure out what to concentrate on, is the forensic area something that you'd still say has value long term?
Oh, absolutely. It's just going to be different. The traditional approach to static media forensics, take an image of a hard drive, particularly electromagnetic hard drive, and carve the unallocated clusters to revive deleted files, search the slack space, as I talked about in my article, analysis of registry files and the like. That is nearing its end point in many respects. But for every artifact we lose in static media forensics, we probably acquired 2 or 3 new artifacts. So yes, the cloud is going to change the entire paradigm of forensics. We are not going to get a chance to peek into the back end of the data. I'm not going to be able to go to a data center, acquire physical media, and do my magic as in the past. But there are many, many more endpoints of data that can be collected either with user privileges or by being able to access an API, an application programming interface, by working with the provider, in some instances, even by collection from a local device. There's some information you can get off of an Internet of Things device locally, and much you can pull off its cloud repositories or its local applications on a cell phone or on a computer. So there are many more places to go, much more recording of the fact of transactions and the data to validate those transactions. So still lots of forensics, but the forensics will take less the form of using specialized tools to get data off of storage devices, and it will be much more in an interpretive function, looking at a variety of different logs and artifacts and data sets and being able to analyze those to find gaps, to establish data has been lost or destroyed, and from many more sources of information. 15 years ago, we would go to the computer and loose media, maybe 20 years ago. Today, the first place I'm going to go is the phone. That wasn't true before the iPhone, as a practical matter. So as you look at the sources are multiplying. They are applying many different forms and structures. It's not just Windows and iOS anymore. It's all kinds of proprietary data structures, and we'll be having to deal with those. You're still going to need forensicators, as some of my colleagues like to call themselves. You're still going to need forensic experts to explain what the data signifies and why it can be trusted or shouldn't be trusted, how it might have been altered, how it couldn't be altered. And we still have a lot of electronic evidence, more and more every day, and it is still harder and harder for lawyers to keep up and to make sense of it.
Makes sense. So speaking of a cloud application, I've got a question. Why do you hate LinkedIn? I went to your profile on LinkedIn.
I think that's a good question.
And
it's an old. Oh, I'm sorry. You were. Please. I stepped on you.
I was just going to say, if you look on Craig's LinkedIn profile, you'll see not a whole lot there. So yeah, just wondering. I assume that's purposeful.
It is. I'm not on MySpace or Second Life either. And I don't, I feel like you can take me to task that I didn't join them either. When LinkedIn first appeared, all I got were, I used to be a contender. Now I'm just an old guy, but I used to be somebody sort of in this business, at least somebody that in a tiny pond, I was a larger protoplasm. And so I get all these requests from people I didn't really know. Won't you link with me? Won't you essentially vouch for me electronically? And I was back then bombarded frequently, and the LinkedIn at its genesis is a very different LinkedIn than it is today, where it is it's kind of like Facebook for people who don't like to laugh very much, I guess. I don't know what to say. I tweet. And when I first started Twitter, I wrote, "This is ridiculous. Who's going to want to communicate in haiku?" And I've gotten to the point where I'm tweeting, a couple of times a day if I have something that at least I find amusing or worthwhile. I do Facebook, and my rule with Facebook is it has to be real, honest to goodness, flesh and blood friends with whom I communicate in Facebook. So I'm sure I've offended a lot of people that I've, maybe, corresponded with briefly or something that I don't link to them. I think Facebook is personal, and that's how I use Facebook.
Right.
Beyond that, I don't do a lot on Instagram. So I don't know what would I gain by being on LinkedIn that I don't already have. It's not like I'm hard to find. I put my email on everything. If somebody wants to communicate with me, my cell number's on everything. If somebody wants to get a hold of me, I'm not hard to find. I'm not J.D. Salinger or anything hiding up in New England. I'm out here. Here I am. I'm in New Orleans. Tom will tell you, you can't even go down this street in this thing without, hitting me with some swung cat.
Is that true, Tom?
I
have no idea what he's talking about.
We live in the smallest town in the world. You can't go anywhere in New Orleans without running into somebody you know. So if you come to New Orleans, even if you're trying to avoid me, you'll probably run into me somewhere. So don't worry about LinkedIn. I'm not going to help your professional stature. If anything, I'm probably going to be an anchor to your standing in the community. So don't worry about LinkedIn.
I don't know.
Let me test you. You guys think I should get on LinkedIn? Is there something waiting for me there that's going to enrich my life?
No, if you're comfortable in a world with memes and pictures of cats, Russian bots, and people who want to liberate Michigan, I think you should stick with Facebook, and more power to you.
And what's the alternative on LinkedIn?
Professional affiliation with people who are having conversations about our industry.
More chances to use free time to talk about business.
Yes.
Where have you been? Where have you been the last 10 weeks, my friend? Okay, it's like it's just no. There's more. I want to stop and smell some roses here. I don't.
I'd love to be able to go outside and smell roses.
And I suggest you turn the computer off altogether and step outside.
That's good advice. Thank you all, gentlemen, very much. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you for your
So,
time here. Hey,
Um,
before we, speaking of that, though, we are getting close to the end of our time. I want to ask the question that we've been asking people we've talked to before, Craig, which is this is the big closer, all right? The end of the monologue is coming. If you could spend, we actually started with you could spend an hour talking to somebody. I see that on our notes by Cliff Notes here. Rocky's expanded it to if you could spend one day working with someone in our industry. But if you could spend some time with somebody from our profession / industry, living or dead, who would it be?
and why?
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean, there are quite a few, honestly.
That's why I said one.
Yes, I gather that. Well, living or dead.
Yeah, it
I
could be.
think that Nikolai Tesla would be interesting. Steinmetz. I mean, I know people think Edison would be interesting, but I don't find it. To me, Edison was kind of the Steve Jobs of his time, a promoter. Well, I mean, Edison was not a very nice guy. If you read the history of his dealings with George Westinghouse, he was kind of a Jobsian kind of person. He was very ruthless in that sense, and all about his own ego. I think Tesla. The only problem with Tesla is he's a real weird duck, and so I don't know how good the conversation would be. If it had to be somebody living, it would be a privilege to talk once more to Bill Gates, and I think that I admire Bill Gates post Microsoft more than just about anybody else in the world. I think he will save more lives. He will do more good on a global scale than perhaps anybody living today. Certainly his philanthropy will eclipse anything in history by anybody's adjusted dollars. And so I feel privileged to count him among our generation as someone who's not only transformed the world from a standpoint of technology. And you may say, oh, well, Gates didn't really create anything. He borrowed from others. But the same could be true of many who've built industries. They maybe didn't create the thing, but they made it, they put it in our hands. And certainly Microsoft, good or ill, depending upon your point of view, I'm a Microsoft fan. They've changed the world. I mean, they've made computing accessible to all of us. And people may like to bash Microsoft, but when Microsoft used to in the old days acquire competitive tools, they would then take those features and build them right into Windows, and you then essentially got those tools for free.
E-discovery, huh, Rocky? That would be a great idea if they do that and take an e-discovery tool and build it into the operating system.
Well, I know you're being sarcastic because you and Rocky are two people most knowledgeable about the fact that Microsoft has done just that in the Office 365 ecosystem, and it's probably the most affordable sophisticated e-discovery solution in the world. If you actually look at it, it's probably the most affordable, scalable e-discovery solution. Now, does it do everything? No, it's still in kind of its kick the tires infancy. But from the standpoint of how it handles Microsoft products, I admire the progress they've made pretty quickly. And it's like anything else. You can fight Microsoft. You can pretend you can get by building your own, Raspberry Pi Linux box and live under a sheet of tin in the desert. But for the rest of us, Microsoft still rules the roost. It still accounts for 85% of the installed operating systems among computer and business and user systems. Yep. Microsoft is personal computing today, and I think we need to respect how cost effective it is and how universal it is. You don't go out. I mean, Warren Buffett and Queen Elizabeth and Beyonce don't use some special operating system only for rich people. They don't do presentations only on rich people tools. The egalitarian tools of today are the tools made by Microsoft. Bill Gates was to computing what Henry Ford was to transportation.
Yeah. Good
So,
analogy.
yeah, I think it is a great analogy. But notice how Craig, Tom, you asked the question of in our profession, in our industry, and Craig broadened it a bit to the general technology space, and
Well,
the answer of Tesla and Bill Gates, as a good attorney does when they want to redirect the question in the right way.
Well, my industry, remember, I'm a technologist. Yeah, I'm a
Fair enough.
lawyer,
I think that was
a
fair
lot of
enough,
things,
though.
but I'm
Yeah.
a technologist. And so our industry is information technology, is how I look at it.
Yeah.
You know,
Think of it
I
this way,
think Bill
Rocky.
Gates
Think of it
is in
as
our
we're
industry.
between two ferns. We're between the information fern and the technology fern. Right? She was
Yep.
taking a path there down between the two ferns.
I won't argue on that.
Hey,
So,
we got to wrap it up here, Rocky. Got any closing
Yep.
thoughts?
well, just Craig, thanks. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. And, I think this series is really just about people we like to chat with. So we appreciate you spending some time with us.
Well, I'm
and-
flattered to be included. Thank you both.
We're going to circle back to you about the costume, though.
Sure, we didn't talk about anything substantive. If you'd ever like to do that, I'm available at any time.
No. We're totally into frivolous, and this is the equivalent of, and I think even more so now that we're in the shelter in place / quarantine / I can't go out of the house. This is more about the coffee clatch around the water cooler at the office, sort of, what's new, what's exciting, what's bugging you these days, sort of thing. We get plenty of stuff about the latest technology, and Craig, you're certainly the source of much of that for us. So the idea here was to be a little bit more off the serious track, if you will, and who better than me to guide that conversation?
Well, thank you. One of the things that has come to me in this pause, and I know you want to wrap it up, Tom, but I was going to have the last word. So one of the things that came to me in this pause is for me at least the need to kind of go back to basics. And for me, the basics is computer forensics and the way data really lives. And so for Rocky, for you might appreciate it. The next article that I'm mulling over writing is how to get ultra precise time and date information that's hidden and embedded in very interesting ways inside the boundaries of email and Gmail. And I think that's going to be a kind of a little mind blower for people who like finding something that's a powerful piece of evidence that they didn't know was there. And it's so cool because the number you get, you have to decode it in a very peculiar way at least for lay people. And then you have to multiply it times the number of 100 nanosecond intervals since January 1st, 1601. And then you get an actual hidden time and date value for when the forged email was really the original was really created. Rocky knows what I'm talking about. But, for lawyers to be able to find some kind of evidence like that, that's like something out of, NCIS New Orleans or what have you.
Well, I'll tell you, I was going to read the new Stephen King novel, but now I'm setting aside the next month to just wait on the edge of my seat for that article to come out.
Yes.
Edge
And
of
on
your
that
seat.
note,
Embedded time codes in Gmail. Oh, man. I've been wanting the answer to that question since who put the RAM in Ramalama Dig Dog.
What if it happens? What if it exonerates? What if it exonerates your client, Tom?
Yeah, well, everybody's entitled to a good defense, but he should have.
Doesn't mean you want him to get off, right?
He should have dropped the gun and taken the cannoli. That's all I got to say about that.
Craig,
For those of you listening who don't know, that is a 48-year-old movie reference.
All right. Well, Craig, thanks for your time. Always a pleasure talking with you.
The same, my old friend. How are? Nice to see you both. And Mazel Tov to you over in Tel Aviv. Rocky, take care. Be safe. Distance. Wear your masks. All that good stuff.
All right. Yep. Rocky, thanks again. We'll see everybody next time on the eDiscovery channel.